Hey everyone, hope you had a great weekend. Just a heads up, I have messaged out parents today with a survey that I'm asking everyone to complete. It's available in both English and Spanish, so make sure that your parents or you have completed that survey first. That'll let me know how I can continue with moving forward with some of our lessons from home. So I also want to give a huge shout out to one of my students whose grandma made me this amazing background little thing. This side is Harry Potter. This side is Disney princesses. She gave it to me for Christmas. It's a stocking, but it's March and I'm still leaving it out because it's awesome.
Welcome to another episode of Miss N Reads.
All right. When we last left Luke, he had gone over to Jen's house again and was learning more about the population law and why it exists and how some of the books from the government were different than some of the articles that were written by other people. And Luke's kind of trying to figure out how to think for himself about this. And Jen's very firmly saying that the government is wrong and we have to hold this big rally in April to show everybody that we're third children and we're real and we exist and we deserve the same rights as everyone else. So she's planning this big thing in April, but now it's winter and Luke is having a harder time sneaking over to Jen's house and he still hasn't told his parents. And all Jen can seem to talk about is this rally. So we're going to read a couple chapters today and they're going to go very, very fast. So let's see what happens next as we get ready for the rally. Chapter 22. It rained the first 2 weeks of April, and Luke was in a tizzy wondering when he would ever get to see Jen again. Finally, the ground dried out, and Dad headed out to the fields to plow. Luke raced to Jen's house. "Oh, good," she greeted him. "You can get the advanced battle plans. I was afraid we were just going to have to pick you up Thursday night and fill you in then." Luke carefully slid the door shut behind him and straightened the blinds so he and Jen would be totally hidden. Then he turned to face her. "What are you talking about?" he asked. But he knew. His heart began to thump harder than it had in his rush through the backyards. "The rally, of course," Jen said impatiently. "Everything's set. I'm taking one of my parents' cars, and I'm picking up 3 other kids on my way, but I made sure there'd be room for you. You should feel lucky. Lots of kids are just going to walk. We're all meeting at the president's house at 6 a.m. Luke clutched the cord on the blinds. "Do you know how to drive?" he asked. "Well enough." She flashed him a wicked grin. "My brothers told me how. Come on." She waved him over to the couch. He sank into it while Jen perched on the edge. "What if the population police stop you before you get to the Capitol?" he asked. "Us, you mean. We. You're going too, remember? Don't worry, nobody'll stop us." She giggled. "I checked the national employee staffing schedules through the computer. Let's just say several of the population police got some unexpected days off." "You mean you changed their schedules? You can do that?" Jen nodded, a wicked gleam in her eyes. "It took me a whole month to figure out how, but you are now looking at an accomplished hacker." Dimly, Luke realized why Jen had seemed so relaxed and happy on his last several visits. They'd been vacations for her, breaks from intense work on plans for the rally. He looked closer and saw the fatigue in her eyes. She looked like a younger version of Mom after a 12-hour shift in the chicken factory, or Dad after a long day of baling hay, but there was something more in her expression. His parents had never looked so feverishly giddy. "What if someone finds out what you did and changes it back?" Jen shook her head. "They won't. I was very selective. I coordinated everyone's travel plans and only eliminated the police who had to be eliminated. Aren't you excited? We're going to be free after all these years." She leaned down and pulled a sheaf of papers out from under the couch. "Best hiding place in the world. The maid's too lazy to clean under there. Now, let's see. I'll pick you up at 10 p.m. and..." Luke was glad she was looking at the papers instead of him. He wouldn't have been able to meet her eyes. Okay, so Nobody's going to be caught on the way to the Capitol, but once you're there at the president's house, someone will call the population police, and then... Oh, Luke felt panicky just thinking about it. Jen wasn't fazed. So what? She asked. I don't care who gets called once we're there. Heck, I may call the population police myself. They're not going to do anything to a crowd of 1,000, especially not when lots of us are related to government officials. We'll make them listen to us. We're a revolution. Luke looked away. But you're friends. You were mad at them because they weren't into it. What if they don't show up? What do you mean? Jen's voice was fierce. Luke could barely speak for the panic welling inside him. In that chat room, they were making jokes. Carlos and Sean and the others. You said they weren't taking it seriously. Oh, that was a long time ago. They're all on board. They're psyched. Why, Carlos is my lieutenant in all of this. You wouldn't believe how much he's helped. So, okay, 10 o'clock, then it's 8 hours to the Capitals, and she consulted her papers again. What kind of sign do you want to carry? I deserve a life, or end the population law now. Or, this is the one I found in an old book. Give me liberty or give me death. Luke tried to imagine what Jen seemed to be taking for granted. He could get in a car. He'd sat in the pickup in the barn. A car wasn't much different. And for 8 hours. That would be all he had to do. Sit. Not that difficult. Except that panic would be coursing through him for the entire 8 hours because of where the car was going. And then to get out in public at the president's house and carry a sign. His imagination failed. He broke out into a cold sweat. Jen, he started. Yes? Jen waited. The silence between them seemed to be growing like a balloon. Luke struggled to speak. I can't go. Jen gaped at him. I can't, he said again, weakly. Jen shook her head briskly. Yes, you can, she said. I know you're scared. Who isn't? But this is important. Do you want to hide all your life, or do you want to change history? Luke made a stab at humor. Isn't there another choice? Jen didn't laugh. She sprang up from the couch. Another choice? Another choice. She paced and then jerked back to face Luke. Sure, you can be a coward and hope someone else changes the world for you. You can hide up in that attic of yours until someone knocks down your door and says, oh yeah, they freed the hidden. Want to come out? Is that what you want? Luke didn't answer. You've got to come, Luke, or you'll hate yourself the rest of your life. When you don't have to hide anymore, even years from now, there'll always be some small part of you whispering, I don't deserve this. I didn't fight for it. I'm not worth it. And you are, Luke. You are. You're smart and funny and nice, and you should be living life instead of being buried alive in that old house of yours. Maybe I just don't mind hiding as much as you do, Luke whispered. Jen faced him squarely, her gaze unwavering. Yes, you do. You hate walls as much as I do. Maybe more. Have you ever listened to yourself? Every time you talk about how you used to go outdoors and work in the garden or something, you glow. You're alive. Even if you don't want anything else, don't you want to get the outdoors back? What Luke wanted was to get away from Jen, because she was right. Everything she had said was right. But that couldn't mean he had to go. He huddled deeper in the couch. I'm not brave like you, he said. Jen grabbed his shoulders and peered into his eyes. Oh yeah? You dared to come over here, didn't you? And here's something. Why are you always the one that makes the trip? Ever think of that? If I'm so much braver, how come I'm not risking my life to come see you? There were 1,000 answers to that. Because I found you first, because your house is safer than mine, because I need you more than you need me. You've got your computer and all your chat room friends and you go places. Luke squirmed away. My dad hangs around my house too much, he said. It's safer this way. I'm protecting you. Jen backed up. Thanks for the chivalry, she said bitterly. I've got enough people protecting me. If you care so much, why don't you help get me free? You say you won't come to the rally for yourself, so do it for me. That's all I'll ever ask of you. Luke winced. When she put things that way, how could he not go? Except he couldn't. "You're crazy," he said. "I can't go, and neither should you. It's too dangerous." Jen flashed him a look of pure disgust. "You can leave now," she said coldly. "I don't have time for you." Luke could feel the ice in her words. He stood up. "But..." "Go," Jen said. Luke stumbled towards the door. He stopped by the blinds and turned around. "Jen, can't you understand? I do want it to work. I hope..." "Hope doesn't mean anything," Jen snapped. "Action's the only thing that counts." Luke backed out the door. He stood on the Tabbits' patio, blinking in the sunlight, breathing in the smell of fresh air and danger. Then he turned and ran home. Chapter 23. Luke let the kitchen door slam behind him, and he didn't care. He was so mad. His eyes blurred. The nerve of her saying, "I don't have time for you." Who did she think she was? He tramped up the stairs. She'd always thought she was better than him, just because she was a baron, showing off with her soda and her potato chips and her fancy computer. So what? It didn't mean she was special, just because her parents had lots of money. It wasn't like she'd earned it or anything. Who was she anyway? Just some dumb old girl. He wished he'd never gone over there. All she did was brag, 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 and show off. That's all the rally was anyhow, showing off. "Hey, look, I'm a third child, and I can go to the president's house and nobody'll hurt me." He hoped someone shot her. That would show her. Luke stopped in the middle of pulling the attic door shut behind him. No. He took it back. He didn't want anyone to shoot her. His knees went weak, and he had to sit down on the stairs. All of his anger suddenly turned into fear. What if someone did shoot her? He remembered the sign she'd asked if he wanted to carry, "Give me liberty or give me death." Was she serious? Did she expect to? He stopped himself from thinking the rest. What if she never came back? He should go, if only to protect Jen, but he couldn't. Luke buried his face in his hands, trying to hide from his own thoughts. Mother found him there, hours later, still crouched on the stairs. "Luke, were you impatient waiting for me to get home? Did you have a nice day?" Luke stared at her as though she were a vision from another life. He started, ready to spill everything. He couldn't hold it all in. Mother felt his forehead. "Are you sick? You're so pale. I worry about you, Luke, all day long. Then I remind myself you're safe at home, out of harm's way." She gave him a weary smile and ruffled his hair. Luke swallowed hard and recovered himself. What was he thinking? Couldn't tell anybody about Jen. He couldn't betray her. "I'm fine," he lied. "I just haven't been out in the sun for a while, remember? Not that I'm complaining, of course," he added hastily. Hiding. Again. Chapter 24. Take a moment right now and just imagine how Luke is feeling right now. He's got his best friend in the whole world about to do something stupid and dangerous and risky, but so important. And he's scared for her, but he can't tell anyone about it. I'm curious to see if Luke's going to go or not. For 3 days, Luke agonized. Sometimes he decided he had to stop Jen, to persuade her not to go. Sometimes he decided he ought to go with her. Sometimes he was mad again and thought he should just stalk over there and demand an apology. But anything he might do required seeing Jen, and that wasn't possible. It poured every day, the rain coming down in long, dreary sheets that made Luke feel worse as he watched from the attic vents. Downstairs, he could hear Dad stomping around, muttering every now and then about the time and the topsoil being lost with every raindrop. Luke felt like a prisoner. Thursday night, he went to bed convinced he'd never be able to sleep for imagining Jen and the others in her car, getting farther and farther from him and closer and closer to danger. But he must have dozed off because he woke to total darkness. His heart pounded. He was sweaty. Had he dreamed something? Had he heard something? A floorboard creaked. His ears roared as he tried to listen. Was that someone else's breath or just his own? loud and scared. A beam of light swept across his face. "Luke," a whisper. Luke bolted up in bed. "Jen, is that you?" She switched off her flashlight. "Yes, I thought I'd kill myself coming up your stairs. Why didn't you tell me they were so narrow?" She sounded like the same old Jen. Not mad, not crazy. "I didn't know you'd ever be climbing them," Luke said. It was insane to be talking about stairs now, in the middle of the night, in his room. Every word either of them spoke was dangerous. Mother was a light sleeper, but Luke was delighted not to be moving on, not to be talking about what Jen had really come to talk about. "Your parents didn't lock your doors," Jen said. She seemed to be stalling too. "Guess I'm lucky the government outlawed pets." "Didn't farmers always used to keep big guard dogs that would chomp people's heads off in one bite?" Luke shrugged. Then he remembered Jen couldn't see him in the dark. "Jen, He wasn't sure what he was going to say until he said it. "I still can't go. I'm sorry. It's something about having parents who are farmers, not lawyers. And not being a baron. It's people like you who change history. People like me, we just let things happen to us." "No, you're wrong. You can make things happen." Luke sensed rather than saw Jen shaking her head. Even in the dark, he could visualize each precisely cut strand of her hair bouncing and falling back into place. "I'm sorry," she continued. "I didn't come here to harp on you. This is dangerous, and no one should go unwillingly. I was too hard on you the other day. I just wanted to say, you've been a good friend, and I'll miss you." "But you'll be back," Luke said, "tomorrow or the next day after the rally. I'll be over to visit. If your rally works, I'll be walking in the front door." "We can hope," Jen said softly. Her voice faded away. "Goodbye, Luke." Chapter 25. So he just got a visit from Jen in the middle of the night at his house, which is so dangerous. Oh my goodness. They're so lucky that his parents didn't wake up. Luke lay awake the rest of the night. At first light, he got up and quietly scrubbed away the mud Jen had tracked in and up the stairs. Trust her to not think about mud. He fervently hoped she'd thought of all the details about the rally. Luke was just finishing the last of the kitchen floor when he heard the toilet flushing upstairs. He hid the muddy rags in the trash and scrambled back to his place on the stairs just in time to meet Mother coming down. "Morning, early bird," she yawned. "Were you up during the night? I thought I heard something." "I had trouble sleeping," Luke said, truthfully. Mother yawned again. You're up early? Feeling okay?" "Just hungry," Luke said. But he picked at his food. Everything he ate stuck in his throat. After the rest of his family left, he risked sneaking over and turning the radio on low. There were weather reports and commercials for soybean seed and lots of music. Come on, he muttered, keeping one eye on the side window watching for Dad. Finally, the radio voice announced the news. Someone's cattle had gotten out and caused a minor car wreck. Nobody hurt. A government spokesman predicted a poor planting season because of the rain. Nothing about the rally. Dad came back toward the house. Luke snapped off the radio and bolted for the stairs. At lunch, Dad forgot to turn the radio on and Luke had to remind him. The announcer promised a big story after the commercials. His sandwich gone, Dad reached over and turned the radio off. No, wait, Luke said. This might be interesting. Dad harumphed, but waited. The announcer came back. He cleared his throat and declared that the new government statistics proved last year's alfalfa harvest had set a record for the decade. Farming news? It was like that for days. Luke kept waiting, desperate to hear anything. But the few times he could get to the radio, it said nothing. Every time Dad left the house for any length of time, Luke switched on the light by the back door, his old signal to Jen. He stared so hard, willing her to her answering light to go on, that he thought he would go blind. But there was nothing. He took to watching her house as obsessively as he had when he had first discovered her existence. There was no sign of her. The rest of her family came and went as usual. Did they look sadder, happy, worried, at peace? From a distance, he couldn't tell. He got so desperate, he asked Mother if she'd thought about going over to visit the new neighbors to welcome them to the area. She looked at him as if he were deranged. They've been there for months. They're hardly new anymore, and they're barrens, she said. She laughed in a way that didn't hide her bitterness. Believe me, they don't want us visiting. And what was she supposed to do? Say, nice to meet you, now tell me everything about the child you never talk about? After a week, Luke did feel deranged. Every time anyone spoke to him, he jumped. Mother asked him, Are you all right? So many times he just took to avoiding her, but he couldn't just sit in the attic waiting. He paced, he fidgeted, he chewed his fingernails. He came up with a plan. And we'll continue next time with chapter 26, 27, and 28. And then we will read chapter 29 and I believe 30. So you're looking at 2 more videos until we are done with the book.